rounding third, heading for home, let's just focus on the fact that our country has been under siege. And part of it is because of our seeming either unwillingness or incapacity to lead. When the President of the United States decided some years ago to go visit China, he thought that he would stop off and visit our friends in Seoul, Korea on the way. And the folks in China said, no, you don't do that. You come see us. So we called our friends, where we only had 40,000 troops and the great economy that was given its freedom by American soldiers and now is the 10th largest economy in the world. He said, we'll catch you on the way back. To which China said, no, you won't. If you're going to come to Beijing, you're going to come see us and go home. You're not going to stop anyplace else. And the President of the United States agreed to that. Now, no, it happened to be George W. So, just as an aside, this president went to Tokyo and Seoul and Shanghai, then Beijing, then to a conference in Vietnam, and then to Manila before. And I didn't bother to ask. I'd be curious if the Chinese even asked, or they just knew what was going to happen. But so in the process of what they hope to do, they've allowed America to become dependent with a supply chain that they began to control and manipulate. An American president gave a waiver whereby the targeting mechanism on the nuclear weapons that we have, the most sophisticated in the world, which are very difficult to develop, gave permission for those to be sold to the Chinese. So now they have the same targeting mechanism that we have. The computer chips in the F-14, F-16, F-18, in the fighter aircraft of America are computer chips that are manufactured in China that were given by a presidential waiver who was of our political persuasion. So what happened was that America became dependent on others. And one man came along and said, this doesn't make sense. This isn't wise. Our supply chain, that if we want to build something, they have in a sophisticated manner checked where all of the strategic metals and the necessary ingredients for us to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And Donald Trump said, that's stupid. We shouldn't do that. First of all, we ought to cut off the money, finance him. And so when the president of China stood in the Rose Garden and said he wasn't going to militarize those islands in the South China Sea. Now, why is that important? Because 2/3 of all maritime traffic on the planet goes through the South China Sea. If you control that, you've got the world by the throat. And as they proceeded to take each one of the narrow places to control, such as military installations on both ends of our Panama Canal, including Long Beach, California. And Donald Trump comes along and said, no, cancel that. We're not going to do that anymore. And you're not going to build any more militarization in the South China Sea. And they've quit it. And furthermore, you're not going to get any more money from us. And so if you go to the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, you can see the median income for Americans, where money was taken from America into the banks, sent to New York. They packaged it and sent it abroad to finance our enemies. The 1996, 2006, 2016 median income is a flat line. It is only $200 difference over that 20-year period. But when Donald Trump became president and you and I were successful, in the next 38 months, the median income for Americans jumped $5,300. And in the process of money flowing back into America, the stock market in America, as you know, it jumped 5,000 under the 8 years of Obama. It jumped 1,000 in the first 30 days of Donald Trump and is now 50% higher than it was when he took office. At the stock market in Japan, in China, where we were level and they were gaining on us, it's now dropped 40%. And so the difference is massive. So that's what is at stake. They know that if we win this election, America will continue to be the strongest, most secure nation on the planet. And if we lose this election, they will seek to make us dependent on them again. And that goes to what we have a track record this time. We know that for 40 years, presidents talked about making America energy independent, but this president did it. For 50 years, Washington talked about requiring Europe to honor their commitments to NATO, which is very interesting because the big nations of NATO, France and Germany and the others, when they wanted, little Macedonia wanted to join, or little Albania wanted to join, they demanded that they had to first have the percentage of their GDP that would meet their threshold when they hadn't met it in 30 years. But under this president, it's suddenly begun to come about. For 70 years, presidents talked about bringing peace to the Middle East. And yesterday, Oman, and the day before that, Bahrain, gave praise to our president for negotiating an agreement between the United Arab Emirates and exchanging embassies and ambassadors with the State of Israel. And that came about in the very early days of the Trump administration when Reince arranged a trip to Riyadh in which 54 heads of state of Arab Muslim countries turned out to meet Donald Trump because under the previous administration, we had sided consistently with the Iranian Shiites, even to the point of giving them billions and billions of dollars. And as the president made reference to, $1.7 billion in cash. Now, there's only one person on earth, don't look at that. There's only one person on earth, that can get, there's only one person on earth that could get that much cash, and that's the President of the United States of America. And they got it together on pallets. And as you remember, said, why do you have to have that much cash? The reason you have to have cash is because you cannot write a check on the Royal Bank of Scotland to a terrorist to blow up another building. When he goes to cash his check, they catch him. And so therefore you have to have cash, and the only person that could do it would be a supporter of theirs, and the United States did it. And then when we released all the money, which they said was their money, they keep saying, well, it was their money anyway. No, it wasn't. The people that belonged to were decapitated. You guys were thieves. This is as though you're saying that you stole all this Jewish art and now you're a Nazi and you're entitled to it. No, you're not. You stole it in the first place and it doesn't belong to you, and we have no reason to give it back to you. But when he did give it to them, they deposited it and made promises to the Russians. They ordered all of these fighter jets so that they could overwhelm Israel and disrupt the balance in the Middle East. And when Donald Trump became president in perfect timing, he shut down the banking system so that those assets are now frozen, so they don't get access to them. And that's why those 54 Sunni Muslim leaders came to meet with him, because he understood them. I realize my time is up, but let me just make around the corner. I'm like, that's all right. I'm like a preacher. I'm like a preacher. I just say that to give you hope. I don't really mean it. But listen, I've watched. Liz says that there's some people that have a defective gene, a political gene. It's incurable. There's nothing you can do about it. And so I watched all of the Buttigieg and Harris and all those people and Pocahontas and all, and on C-SPAN all hours of the night as they were running for office, and they would all say in their town hall meetings, if this man is reelected, 40 years of progressive legislation will be destroyed. We can survive the damage of 4 years, but if he gets another term, we're finished. And I just get so fired up about the idea. And yet, so I've watched, after we've done here, I've watched the last 4 nights. And those folks have nothing of which they're part. They want to hang this whole thing on a pandemic. They said they needed ventilators. And you know what Donald Trump did? He buried them in ventilators. They had to go across the border to Connecticut and in New Jersey to storm. He had so many ventilators. Then they said, well, we need beds. And so they go in the Javits Center and make these secure, ventilated places where they could take care of them and loaded it up. And then bring a ship, and they knew the ship was in dry dock for at least 4 months, but we don't have a politician, we have an entrepreneur. And so he said, I don't care about 4 months, 4 days. I want that thing going, and I'm coming down to watch it leave. And so they scrambled around, and they sent that ship up to the harbor in New York and found out that they really didn't even need it. And then, of course, when Samaritan's Purse came and people volunteered to come take care of those folks in Central Park, what did the mayor do? Rather than saying thank you, as anyone with an ounce of manners would do, he harassed them on their spiritual beliefs, and the governor of New York and Albany attributed wages to them for their volunteer service and sent them an income tax bill. So these folks, that's their high watermark of their accomplishments. They couldn't find a single school district in America that they've run for these decades of which they could be proud, where the education for a child has been improved. They couldn't find a single city in America that under their management has been made safer or more prosperous. They had 3 secretaries of state speak. Not one of them could come up with one single accomplishment of which they could be proud. Where our president can talk about conquering ISIS, the supply chains, all of the other things that he has done, as you know, internationally to change the whole direction of the world. Now, what is, having seen the difference they had, seen where we are, now it's up to us. And let me just say that I'm not fearful. Scripture says that perfect love casteth out all fear, because fear hath torments. And he hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, what are those? Those are the mirror opposites of fear. When you're fearful, you're not strong. He gave us power. Of love, as we said. You cannot love a person that you're afraid of. And a sound mind. When you're afraid, you don't think right. So he hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. That's what makes America function when we're not fearful. And yet, if you want to control a person, you do it. I have a friend that we went to dinner one night with Liz and his wife, and he said one of the things that had always frustrated him was watching how these Jewish families would get onto these boxcars knowing that they were going to disappear, and there would only be maybe a Nazi guard at one end of the station or someplace. He said, I would think those people could have overrun them. Why didn't they do that? And so I began to explain it to him and discuss it, and the difference between a speaker is he speaks and different between a writer is he writes. And so he went home and wrote a little book. It's about that thick, and he sold over 1 million copies, called How Do You Kill 11 Million People? And the way that you do it is you just lie to them and you keep them in fear. They say the reason that you need to move into this section of the city is so you can be safe. I just want you to be safe. You can be safe. And the reason, why are you putting those walls up around? Well, we want to keep you safe. We want to keep you safe. Well, why are you putting the guards at the entrance to the neighborhood? Well, we don't want, it's a dangerous time. We want to keep you safe. Why must I wear this gold star? Well, that's so that the police can watch and can always keep you safe. And then they come in and they say, we're sad to report that the war's not going so well, and the tanks are coming, and this place is no longer safe. But we have a much better place for you, much better, where the homes are going to be, you have more play space for the children, the schools will be better, and we got much better jobs. And so if you'll go home tonight, men, the fathers, if you'll make an inventory so that we'll know how many pianos and paintings and things, and we'll come back and get those. But explain to your children that tomorrow they'll bring just a day's worth of change and one suitcase with some change, and we're going to have to take this train. It's going to be very uncomfortable for the couple of 3 hours, but at the end of it, everything's going to be so much better. And they're going to take their key and their guidance from you, how you respond. And if you're frightful, then your wife will be frightful, and the children will be frightful. But if you're secure, then we can do that. And so they began to march them in using fear. And now, when we look at the actions that have been taking place and scaring Americans into abandoning their confidence, that as we saw what happened in California, where they came up with more and more crazy things that they could just think up. They said, you can't meet. Okay, you can't meet. So the Catholic priests began to serve communion in the driveway, in the parking lot. I said, no, you can't do that. You got to stay apart. And then they found out that they were saying the rosary. He said, well, that's chanting. And so the governor said that you cannot chant. Try to find that in the Constitution. And then he said that you cannot sing, and the churches consistently began to back up until finally we had what was called is the midst of tyranny. And so this morning, one judge and one pastor came to an agreement that this is going to stop, and that they began to move it. And so he said, we're going to court, and we're going to not respond. And so they're beginning to stand back, and that's where you and I come in. That we have this great responsibility laying on our shoulders. And let me just follow up with what Kay read moments ago, in which she mentioned about George Washington on the day that he had not had a single victory. And you remember that he was going to go down and cross the Delaware, and that they could follow because of the shoes fell apart and they wrapped him in burlap, and you could follow because of the blood in the snow. Well, the day before, on December 23rd, Thomas Paine had written this pamphlet, which George Washington then had read to the troops on the 24th, so that when they attacked on Christmas Day, that they would. And she mentioned the first paragraph, which was, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from service to his country." And then you go through it. Let me go down to the fourth paragraph of that same statement by Thomas Paine, December 23rd, 1776. He talks about fear. Is it surprising to see how rapidly a panic will sometimes run through a country? All nations and ages have been subject to them. Britain trembled at the report of a French fleet of flat-bottomed boats in the 15th century. And the whole English army, having just finished ravaging the kingdom of France, became panicked and petrified with fear, and were driven back by a handful of broken forces headed by a woman, Joan of Arc. Yet panics, in some cases, have their uses. They can produce good as well as hurt. Their duration is short, and their advantage is this, and this is my closing thought. They bring both things and men to light, which might otherwise have lain forever undiscovered. They expose traitors. Well, the reason that Donald Trump was so unique in what he was able to accomplish is because there has been a film, a veneer across the top of the Republican Party that was controlled by a handful of folks that would deny people that believe and think as you and I do from ever being successful politically. And so that they would get, for example, they would get, well, John Boehner is a good one, but but Mr. Romney, there's this organization called the Lincoln Project. And the members of the Lincoln Project, and most of you fortunately don't have to endure them, but their commercials are constant here in D.C. because they're attacking the Republican leadership, in which they ridicule the President of the United States over and over in the most vicious manner, using things that the Democrats have always used, that Republicans are racist, and Republicans are bigoted, and Republicans care only about the rich, and they hate the poor, and it's all that. And the people that run it are the former campaign managers for the Romney campaign, for the McCain campaign, for the Bush campaign. Nicole Wallace is one of them. She's on Scarborough. She was the communications director, and that's not the press secretary. The press secretary has worked for the communications director over the entire Bush administration, and she's on every morning on Scarborough attacking our country. Now, the interesting thing, that those people were always there, but because of this fight, because of this panic, they've exposed themselves. And that's why Donald Trump has greater approval among Republicans, because he's like us. And we've always tried to help the people that really weren't like us, but they weren't the other people. But he's actually one of us. And the benefits of that are just so gigantic that we have every reason to be more optimistic than ever in our lifetimes. One quick example was the case that Kelly Shackelford's group had, which was the Bladensburg Cross, where the district court said, you're not allowed to have a cross, that's shameful. And then the appellate just said, well, if you cut the arms off of it, you can then just leave the tower. And then it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, by a vote of 5-4, because the one thing about the Democrats, they will always vote on the court in lockstep. You don't have to ever even think about what they're going to do. They don't waffle, so they're 4 solid. But the other 5 said that, there's nothing in the Constitution that you can't do that. In fact, you're using the Lemon decision. It was written in 1971, which said that people couldn't go to a high school football game and pray. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that. And 3/4 of the decision was overturning that. We are on the threshold of what has been the main problem forever, has been higher education, these colleges, these universities with their endowments that have been anti what we've stood for all these years. They are on the rocks. Harvard is not meeting this fall. They're going to do this virtual thing. There's no way on earth that a person is going to pay $200,000 to. If they use this one, it's $30,000 a year, and this one's $200,000. There are all of the things that have been a concern to us about the courts, about the institutions that have been a threat to us. They are all wobbling and about to come apart. And we are on the threshold of having that opportunity, unlike ever before. This nation has been abundantly blessed spiritually. As I mentioned before, I've done many national prayer breakfasts around the globe. And in all of these prayer sessions where the parliaments pray and the foreign ministers and the diplomatic corps and the cabinet members, they always pray for their own country, but then they always pray for the United States of America and the leadership of the United States of America, because they know their security is based upon what we do. But there's nothing they can do about that. They can only pray that you and I will do it. 85 cents out of every dollar that goes for the cost of global evangelism. That is the lighthouse for the gospel. If you take all the money that goes to further the gospel from the entire planet and you increase it 5.5 times, that's not as much as Americans give, because we are the standard for righteousness in the world. You've heard me say before, if a ship is attacked on the high seas, to whom do they turn? Remember Britain, rule Britannia. Britannia rules the waves for 250 years. They dominated the seas. When their ship was taken in the Persian Gulf about 6 months ago, there's only one place they can appeal: the 327,000 Americans that wear the uniform of the United States Navy. If you want to take down a country, the Scripture says, if you want to take a city, you must bind the strong man. If you want to take the world, if you want to destabilize the planet, there's only one strong man in the world. It's the United States of America. If you want to take down America, how do you do that? You disrupt the leadership that God has blessed us with at this time. And that leader is dependent upon us, understands what we have to contribute. And I want to say that I have always had a disproportionate affection for my country. That has been my passion. When I was in the 4th grade, I couldn't name a ball player, but I could tell you all the United States senators. Because this country is a great, great place. And there are those who don't know quite what to do or how to do it. But they're calling upon those to help them to do what is right. And we are going to explain as to what their effort is to destabilize the election in November, December. The Heritage Foundation is going to print a pamphlet, which we are going to, all of us together, are going to distribute. I repeat, when you run for office, you have to have a reason for people to vote for you. And it's one of the first things people ask. You want to be county commissioner? Why? And if you can't answer that question, you're in trouble. It cost Ted Kennedy his race for president, in which Roger Mudd said, "Why do you want to be president?" And he him-hauled and stumbled around so badly on 60 Minutes that his campaign never got its footing again. Our opponents have nothing to offer except their hatred for the greatest nation in the world. They cannot point to a single accomplishment. We, however, have abundant ones, of which we can be very, very proud. And I'll tell you, if you were to give me the odds in the fall of 2016 versus the fall of 2020, I'll take our odds now, much better than they were then. And I have every confidence that you and I, we were put on this earth for a reason. And whether it be politically, economically, or spiritually, we will never have a greater opportunity to make an impact for righteousness than we will in these next 70 days. And because of your willingness to gather together here, and because of the blessing that I sense that we're going to have going out from here, that when we meet next time, we're going to celebrate. God bless.